to go in here. So as I mentioned, my name is Mario Sanchez. I run training here at Sumo Logic, and my goal today is to provide you with some basic understanding of the Sumo Logic service and really how it can help you uncover events that were difficult to do with your simple searches and your simple greps. But before we get started, the housekeeping items is you probably already noticed that you're all on mute, and that's just to avoid distractions. However, if you do want to ask a question, feel free to do so with a GoToWebinar panel on your right-hand side. I'm not sure how often I can check it, given that I'll be mostly on a demo and showing you stuff, but we will definitely, at the end of this call, cover all questions that come through the panel. And the second thing I wanted to mention is that the slides and the recording for this session will be shared with everybody on this call. So they will get posted, and I will send you the links for all that good stuff. So let's get started. I am going to try to make this as live as possible. However, I do have to cover a few slides just to make sure that we understand the 30,000 foot view. But as I promised, I will jump into an instance pretty soon and start going through that. At the end of this, you'll be able to understand the data collection topic. This is an administrative topic, so not everybody has access to collect data, but we'll cover it at a high level for sure. You will learn how to search, you will learn how to parse and how to analyze your data. And also, once you've analyzed that data, you'll learn how to visualize it, how to monitor it, and put it on dashboards, and also how to alert with those on your critical events. You'll learn how to take advantage of the library and the apps that come out of the box. This is content that already exists, and you can readily take advantage of it. And we will talk a little bit about optimization tools. This is an administrative and an advanced topic, but I will definitely start talking about that so that you can start thinking of what's up, what's coming up for you as you start analyzing your data. All right, so let's jump into this. What is Sumo Logic? I'll start with a 30,000 foot view, given that there's a few people here that have not used Sumo Logic in the past. So most of you who are on this call are using Sumo Logic for at least one of the three following use cases. The one on the left-hand side for DevOps, Sumo Logic is going to allow your DevOps teams to monitor your KPIs to deliver your quality software. And you're going to be spending less time in the troubleshooting and a lot more time developing your code. And we're going to help you look at those log files, make sense out of them, and focus on developing your code. For the IT ops, we help with Sumo Logic, we help you extract valuable information such as latencies, performance metrics, trends, and any critical events that are tied to your core systems, and be able to keep an eye on all that stuff. And on the right-hand side, you have compliance and security. So Sumo Logic helps your organizations simplify and automate the compliance and the security monitoring across the entire stack. And we do this using predictive analytics. From a compliance perspective, because we're a cloud native solution, securing your data is extremely important to us. These are some of the certifications we hold. I'd encourage you to go to sumologic.com/compliance so that you can see a little bit more detail on everything, all the hoops that we've gone through. But one of the things I want to point out is that these certifications that you're looking at, these are on top of any AWS security certification. So we've gone through our own hoops to make sure that we can get certified on a lot of these. And really, Sumo Logic is the most thoroughly audited SaaS provider in the analytics space. We're more akin to an organization that harvests government data than just your normal technology company. So when you get a chance, definitely go to sumologic.com/compliance, and you get a little more detail about all that compliance, all the compliance that we've gone through. All right, you're probably going to be recognizing quite a few logos on this slide. The intent here is to give you an idea of the kind of data that we can ingest. We can ingest data from just about any source you can imagine, whether it's structured or unstructured data. These are some of the devices, some of the applications and frameworks you may be using, all of which produce log data that Sumo Logic can analyze. The left-hand side can represent your technology stack, which starts at the top from your custom application all the way down to your virtual and your network devices as well. And a little tidbit of information here, Sumo Logic actually has hired quite a few people from these organizations so that we can span on our domain expertise in these areas. All right, as I promised, 30,000 foot view, and then we're going to start diving into the detail. What does a high level look like for Sumo Logic? let me build this out here for you. So there's three main areas for how the data flows into Sumo Logic. The first one is data collection, getting that data into the system. We're not going to be focusing too much on this because I'm assuming someone already loaded that data for you. But we do this through collectors and sources. We have collectors that can be hosted. We have collectors that can be installed, and these through the sources are able to send data to Sumo Logic. On the second side, you have the search and analyze. So users can run searches and they can correlate events in real time across the entire application stack. We use this is where we're going to be spending most of the time. We're going to teach you some of the operators to build some of this. We're going to show you how to create some charts, and eventually we're going to move over to the third block in here, which is now that we know how to chart our data, how do we create dashboards out of that data so that we can, for example, display them in our operations center, or probably equally important, how do we create alerts so that they're letting us know about our critical events. All right, so from a data collection perspective, I'm going to cover this at a high level, but from a data collection perspective, this is a good picture of a typical customer. A customer that has, in this case, they're sending us web server data, Apache and IIS logs. And they can have, in this case, three different hosts. Host A and host B have what we call an installed collector, which is a small agent that gets installed in that collector, and it's picking up all the log files that you specify from those two different hosts. Host C, on the other hand, is using what we call a hosted collector. So this is an HTTP endpoint, and you can have a script sitting on host C sending data to collector C. For example, you could be curling data. You can use curl to send data over to collector C. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that every single message that gets sent to Sumo Logic, it gets tagged with these 5 metadata fields. Collector, I'm going to use this example on the right-hand side. Collector is the name of the collector that data is coming from. So if you named it collector A, it would have the name of collector A in here. Your source is the name of the source this data is coming through. So in this case, one source would be Apache Access, a separate source would be Apache Error, and I can tag that data with Apache Access and Apache Error. Your source host is the host name of the server. So in this case, it would be host A. Your source name is the actual name of the log file, including the file path. So I could even search by the name of the log file as well. The interesting one here is source category, because category could be any category designation that you decide. And this is where we want to start including some of the best practices. Let me walk you through an example of that same typical customer so that it gives you a good idea of what is a good source category. So you notice now I've enhanced this same slide with the source category itself. So under host A, which has collector A, I've added the source category for my Apache Access. I've added, it looks like it went to the next slide. I've added the source category for Apache Error as well, as you see here. And for host B, I've named that source category the same as my host A. But for host C, I've named it slightly different to be specific to IIS. Now, what you're noticing is that I'm going from broad, in this case a web server, all the way to specific. So web server, Apache, and what kind of Apache files? Well, this is my access file versus my error file. The reason we use a convention like this is because it allows you to do searches like the ones up on the right-hand side. If I search for source category equals WS Apache Access, that means I will be looking for data across host A and host B. So I did not have to specify where collector equals A and collector equals B and source category equals Apache Access, but instead I can search across these. What I could do if I wanted to just search this one is say WS, where source category equals WS Apache Access and host equals host and host name equals host A. So you can be very specific and targeted as well. I could do another search that says ws/apache/star, and in that case, I will be searching for my WS Apache Access and my WS Apache Error data across host A and host B. And if I just said I want to search source category equals WS star, that would let me search across all my web servers, regardless of what brand they are or which host they're sitting on. So coming up with a source category convention that works for your environment is going to be a very, very key thing to do early on. So if there's anything that you take from this webinar as you're getting started is work with your administrator and make sure you come up with a good naming convention that works for you. Now, there is no one way to do it. It's all going to depend on your data. I've added some examples in here like prod, sumo, Apache Access. What is this? This is my environment. So my prod environment. This is my customer. This is my device. This is my message type. Or another example could be OS Windows 2012 messages. This is my device, my vendor, my version, my message type. I'm going to share with you slides, as I mentioned before. This is a great blog post that talks about what is a good source category, what is a bad source category. Definitely a good read when you get a chance and you start thinking about making sure that you have the right naming convention for your source category. Okay, so I'm going to jump into the product as I mentioned before. However, I'm definitely going to use the product as much as I can so that you can see it in action. But before I start with a search, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the cooked turkey. Eventually, at some point, you will want to get to something like this. You will want to have some dashboards in place that are giving you good information. And by the way, one of the things I want to point out is that these dashboards I did not build myself. This is out-of-the-box content that I can just specify where my data is sitting, and these dashboards start lighting up with all this data. So notice all these Apache Access dashboards that I'm going to be showing and scrolling through. These are dashboards that come out of the box. I did absolutely nothing to build these dashboards other than point them to my Apache data, and these dashboards start lighting up with that data. How did I do that? Well, the good news for you is that in your Sumo Logic environment, there is a library, and down in that library, there are some apps. These are out-of-the-box content that we've already built. So let's say that you had Artifactory data, JFrog Artifactory data. You could go ahead and install this Artifactory app, and all these dashboards are going to be available for you, and they're going to be just showing you your data. In my case, what I did is I went into Apache Access, I clicked install, and from this screen, I was able to specify what my source category was for my Apache data, and then I clicked install, and it installed all those dashboards for me. So the idea that I'm trying to give you here is that you don't have to start from scratch. Today, I'm going to show you how to build something from scratch, how to build queries, how to test your queries, how to eventually build them into dashboards. But I do want to specify that there is out-of-the-box content that gets you about 80% there. However, if you ever need to tweak it, if you want to change it to your specific needs, it's pretty simple to do, and I will show you how. For example, this Slash dashboard that I'm going to show you here is one that I built myself from scratch. I put together location of incoming requests, outliers, and trending codes and whatnot. So I'm going to walk you through how to build a dashboard from scratch as well, but I wanted to show you what a dashboard is all about. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. I'm going to go back to search. And for most of you, especially for those of you who click the number 1 and haven't played with Sumo Logic that much, this is probably where you start. You're here on this screen and you have the ability to search anything. Let's say that I want to search for the word get. And if I just type the word get, it goes off and it searches my entire data set for the word get. As a matter of fact, you will notice that some data shows Artifactory. This is for category equals Artifactory. If I scroll down somewhere in here, I might have data for some other category as well. So although it is a good way of searching and the system can bring back some information, perhaps it's not all that meaningful. What would be ideal is to use some of the source category fields that we talked about before, remember? So there is source category, for example. Let's say I want to search for source category equals Apache Access and the word get. I can do that as well. So now here we go. I'm searching for source category equals Apache Access only for the word get, and I get a whole bunch of messages that are showing down here as a result. This histogram you see in here is just a count of messages. Since I searched for the last 15 minutes, it's giving me 15 bars, and it's giving me a count of how many messages were returned on each one of those minutes. If I were to change this to, let's say, 60 minutes, then it would probably give me 60 bars or 30 bars, where each bar represents 2 minutes as well. Now let's talk a little bit about this time frame in here. So if you want to search for some other time frame, you can use the drop down. However, what if I wanted to search for, let's say, the last 45 minutes, which is not listed in here? You can use the following notation, minus 45m. And this is now giving me the last 45 minutes worth of data. Of course, you can use 45h for hours, 45d for days, and you get the point. What if I wanted to get 15 minutes of worth of data, but starting 30 minutes ago? So 15 minutes of data with an offset of 30. You can do that by saying minus 45 to 30 minutes. And now this is giving me 15 minutes of data, 15 minutes worth of data, but starting 15 minutes ago. So you get the point. You can also choose very specific dates. What if I wanted June 1st at 8 a.m. because we had an outage at that time? You can do that. You can do 6/1, 8 a.m. Oops, sorry. Let me put the right number in there. 8 a.m. all the way to, let's say, 6/1 at 8:05. Let's say that I wanted to just look at 5 minutes worth of data. And that is giving me just 5 minutes worth of data for a very, very specific time frame that I wanted to search. And notice I didn't have to specify the year because it's this current year. What you also notice is this little black bubble that pops up in here. It's actually giving me the actual time that I'm going to be looking at. So if I was doing relative stuff like I was doing before, minus 45, it's actually showing me, oh, okay, I'm going to run from right now, which is 10:21, all the way back to 9:36 a.m., because that's 45 minutes worth of data. Okay, so far so good. Let's just grab, to make this easier, I'm just going to grab the last 15 minutes worth of data. Click on start or click enter is the same thing, and it's going to give me my data that I have in here. All right, so this is all great. This is stuff that you can still do with your simple searches and your simple data. You see the results down at the bottom with the word get on there. But what I wanted to start doing now is I want to start making sense of my data. So most of you probably know your Apache access logs. You notice there's an IP address, there's a date, here's the word get that I found from here. Here is the URL itself. There is a status code of 302 in this particular case. Here's the number of bytes. I see a 200 here. I see a lot of 200s. Oh, look, there's a 404. So probably some of the things that you're wondering, and I'm just trying to build a use case here, is I want to find out how many 404s have I gotten? Am I getting a lot of 404s compared to my 200s? So what I'm going to show you now is how do I go about parsing my data so that I can start making some sense out of it. I'm going to show you one way of parsing, and then I'm going to talk about a few other ways of doing it. In this case, I'm going to grab this data in here, and I'm going to say parse the selected text. And what this allows me to do is it opens this simple UI that allows me to say, okay, extract that value and call that the URL. So anything you find between the word get and the word HTTP, extract it, and that's my URL. What you find here, you're going to call that a status code. And whatever you find after that, you're going to call that the, let's say, size. And I click submit. And what just happened is it actually built the parse statement for me. I could have typed it. I could have typed this myself, but it was just a little easier for the system to enter it for me. I'm going to bring it down by hitting Alt-Enter to the next line, only to make this a little easier to read. Also, I can comment things out. If I do this, I can comment it out. So it's just going to make it a little easier if you start putting a new command in a new line. So let's run this now. I'm going to click on start, and what I'm going to see is I still have my message here on the right hand side as I expected, but now notice the fields that I wanted to parse have been parsed out for me. Here's my URL, here's my status code, here is my size. I'm going to talk a little bit about field extraction rules later on. That means the ability to have this get parsed for you automatically when data is getting ingested. But for now, just to keep it simple, I'm going to continue with this exercise, and then we'll come back to field extraction rules. All right, so I know I showed you how to do a little bit of parsing. This is what we call a parse anchor. And the reason it's called an anchor is because we're using a few words as anchors to be able to find data in there. However, there's many ways of parsing your data. I'm going to do a little plug-in here for our documentation. You notice here there is the Parse Operators. I'm just going to go in there. If your data is in CSV format, we know how CSV format looks like, so you could use the CSV operator. If your data is in key value pair, meaning a key and the value for it, for example, name equals Mario, company equals Sumo Logic, and so on, we know what that looks like, so you can use a key value operator for that. If your data is in JSON, we know how to parse that data. But if your data is, it doesn't have a standard format, if your data requires a little more going into it, then you can use the regex operator. Most of you have probably played with regex in your lives, so you can use regex to be able to identify how to extract data from your logs. So having said that, let me show you a simple example. I'm going to show you how to, as a matter of fact, I'm going to kill two birds with one stone. One of the things that you can do is you can create field extraction rules. In this particular case, I already built a field extraction rule for my Apache Access. So if you notice, I'm just going to go and open this one in here. Why don't I edit it so you can see how I built that rule? What I'm saying here is, anytime data comes into the system that it matches this scope, source category equals Apache Access, I want this rule to be applied. So what I wanted to show you is parse regex. Here's an example of using parse regex to parse out the exact same fields I was parsing before. There's status code, there's the refer. Actually, I didn't pull out the refer before, but status code, the URL, and the size. So I'm going to copy this just to show you how you can use it in a query as well. But basically, this is what a field extraction rule is. Because I have this field extraction rule in place, every single message that comes in for Apache Access, source category equals Apache Access, is going to have these fields available for them. Let me show you that. Let's go back to that search query where I was before. Let's comment out this parse statement, meaning I'm not parsing anything anymore, right? I'm just running a query for source category equals Apache Access and the word get. However, here's my results. Look on the left-hand side. This is called the field browser. In that field browser, I have all those fields that have been parsed out by that field extraction rule. There's my URLs, there's my user agents, here's my status codes, my source IP. I can click on any of those, and I can see a lot of values. I can see a lot of aggregation that's been done for me and a lot of calculation. It's showing me that status codes 200s happen about 71% of the time. And it shows me that status codes 404s happen about 4% of the time. So that's as I expected, not happening as much as I expected. It's not happening too much. So that's good. That's good news for my production environment, right? Okay, so now I've shown you how to put together a field extraction rule. I've shown you where to find the fields that a field extraction rule pulls out. But what I wanted to show you in that same example was the ability to use this parse regex. So here's the parse regex that I stole from that field extraction rule. If I hit enter on that, you would notice, and this is, by the way, this is redundant at this point because we do have the field extraction rule, but just for demonstration purposes, I'm showing you that this parse regex gives me, here's my message still on the right-hand side, and here's all the fields that parse regex parsed out for me, extracted for me. User agent, URL, status code, so on and so forth. All right, so since the fields have already been parsed out for me, I'm gonna make this a little easier for us. Let's say that I wanted to get a count by status code because I saw a few 404s in there. Status code. Since status code is a field that has already been parsed out, I can use it. And if I do this count by status code, I can see now that I have about 37,200s and I have about 2,000 404s. And of course, this is for the last 15 minutes. You can keep changing this time frame in here, but this is just for demonstration purposes. Okay. In reality, what I would want to know, if this was my production environment, is are these 404s, where are they? Here's my 404s. Let's say that I just pushed some code and I'm testing to see how my log files are behaving after I push that code. Are these 404s all happening, let's say, on minute number 7? Or are these 404s spread across evenly amongst my 15 minutes worth of data? So one of the things that you can do, and I'm starting to show you, what I'm doing right now is I'm starting to show you some of the more common operators, probably the ones that you're going to be using for, let's say, 80% of the time. Time slice allows me to slice those 15 minutes into buckets. If I say 1 minute, it's going to time slice those 15 minutes into 15 buckets, of course, right? If I had 60 minutes, I could use 5 minutes. I could use 1 hour, whatever you want to use in here, you can use according to the time frame that you're searching. So now that I'm time slicing my data, what I'm going to do is I am going to count it by time slice and by status code. Time slice. I'm fumbling here with my code. So now I can look at this and see my results broken by time slice and broken by status code. So this means that I've had at minute 10:20, I had, for the status code 200, I had these many. And for my 404s, which are the ones that I was worried about, I had about 146. I can scroll down and see, look for the next 404 and see that it was 173. So this is starting to look like, yes, they were evenly distributed. And as I expected, there is no big spike of 404s. But just to make it a little easier to read, I'm going to teach you another operator. This one's called Transpose. And Transpose is very similar to pivoting in Excel. I can specify what my row is going to be. So I'm going to say that my row is my time slice. And I'm going to say that my column is my status code. So this is going to make it a lot easier for me to read, because now I have time down my first column, and I've got my status codes across my columns in here. All right, so as you expected, here's my 404s, and it looks like my 404s are evenly distributed across each one of those minutes, which is a good thing. Let's put 60 minutes on this to look to see how that data changes in any way. There you go. So here's my 60 minutes worth of data. Now I have page 1 of 3 because, of course, I have 60 buckets, and it's just showing me the number of 404s in those different buckets. Great. So far, so good. This is pretty straightforward. I've been able to extract some fields out of my log files, and I can start making some sense and analyzing my data. What's even cooler is that I can easily switch from what I have in here to, let's say, a bar chart showing me now my distribution by status codes. I can change to, say, a line chart that is maybe a little more meaningful. It looks like my 200s are taking over. So let's turn off those 200s. And it looks like my 304s are also. So I'm going to turn off those 304s. And this is what my graph is starting to look like for the rest of my status codes. Let's do this. Since I don't, every time I change information, the 200s and the 304s would come back. So what I'm going to do is I am going to say status code equals 200 or status code equal 304, which were the ones I wanted to get rid of, right? So why don't I put a not in front of it? And that way, I'm going to get rid of those status codes permanently, and I can have my graph now showing me only the status codes that I care about. All right, so I've shown you how to do some quick searches. I've shown you how to chart some of these searches and how to start getting some visuals around those. Each one of these charts. So here is the results. Here are the charts themselves. Each one of these charts has the ability for you to specify a little more detail around them. Let's say that I wanted to use this bar chart. And for this bar chart, you can actually click on settings for each one of these chart types, and you can change things. Let's say that I want to change my series. I want to make everything a bar, but I'm going to make my 404s to be a line. So what this is showing you now is a relationship of your 404s, or it's highlighting my 404s with a line and how they relate to my other status codes, for example. So you could do things like that. Or you can change things into pie charts, you can change things into area charts, and so on. You get the point. I'm going to show you in a little bit how to plot a chart like this. But before I do that, I'm going to cheat a little bit here because I had some examples already open up for you. I just want to show you some other operators that are fairly meaningful that I think you will be finding some good use out of. All right, in this particular case, let me explain to you the query that I built or that I just opened and show you how this was put together. So I'm going against my same source category. I am parsing out the client IP address. I probably didn't have to do this because there is a field extraction rule that is parsing it out for me. But for demonstration purposes, I'm showing you that I parsed out the client IP. And then I'm using an operator called the Lookup Operator. And the lookup is looking for latitude and it's looking for longitude from a service that we have here within Sumo Logic that allows you to search for latitude and longitude on the IP address itself. There's a few other optional fields, and I'll show you the help menu in a little bit on that. But in this particular case, I'm just pulling latitude and longitude, and then I'm doing a count by latitude and longitude, and then I'm sorting it by that count. So here you go. Here is my count broken by latitude and longitude, and that just gives me all my IP addresses and the latitude and longitude for those. Well, one of the options we have in here is a map. If I click on that map, what it's doing is, let me click on this little button, which gives me a little more real estate. What it's doing now is just showing me the distribution of IP addresses broken down by latitude and longitude. And you can imagine that all the usual things happen. So if I focus, say, on this New York area in here, which shows 7,000, as I zoom in, it's going to it's going to break down into the different areas and start showing me where those IP addresses are coming from. Right? Easy enough. Okay, let's look at the other example I have here. This one is using an operator called an Outlier Operator, and this one's going to become fairly important for you. The reason for that is most of the time when things are going well, you probably don't want to take any action. But when things are out of the norm, that's when you want to detect it. So we use this Outlier Operator to help us do exactly that. In this particular case, I'm searching my access data, Apache Access, and I'm really looking just for status codes equals 200. I tried it with a 400, but I don't have enough data in here to show you anything meaningful. And by the way, the and is implicit, so this is the same as saying that. So I don't have to specify the and as it is implicit. But this is saying go for source category equals Apache Access, pull out the status code equals 200, time slice it by 1 minute, then just count that status code as status code. I just created a variable, but I gave it the exact same name. I could have called it something else. But I'm just saying count the status code by time slice, and then use this operator called an outlier. And here's the interesting thing. Outlier is going to build a few additional fields for me. So in this case, here's the status code count that I built, right? That's this guy in here. However, using Outlier builds all these other columns that are here for me. It builds a status code upper, a status code lower, because it's going to start building, it's going to allow me to specify standard deviations and let me know if something is outside of that standard deviation, as I'm going to show you in just a second. I'm going to graph this, and I'm going to come back and explain to you what all these different options here are for the Outlier Operator. So let's graph it, and it looks something like this. The little line in the middle, the blue line, the dark line in the middle, is showing me the data point at that particular point in time. So at 9 a.m., at 9:10 a.m., for example, I had a count of about 3,069 200s. But what this is showing me is it goes back a window of 5 data points. It goes back 5 data points, and it looks at what was the count back then and give me the standard deviation now of what it should be. And then it's saying, how many standard deviations do you want me to show you? I want to please show me a threshold of 3. That means 3 standard deviations. So anything that is outside of those 3 standard deviations, it's going to be marked with a pink triangle, as you show in here. And the direction means, do I show you those that are above the standard deviation and below the standard deviation? Or, for example, should I just show you those that are above and not the ones below? So that's what that direction is all about. This option is all about. So, in summary, what this is showing you is the ability to look at a number and look in the past for a window of 5 or a window of 10 or 10 data points, identify what the standard deviation should be now, and tell you if something is within the standard deviation or outside of that standard deviation, and highlight that, whether you want to just highlight it in a chart as it is in here and put this in your input this up on your operations center, or it gets highlighted with status code equals violation of 1. So you could always create this, you can turn this into an alert. You can easily add a where clause here, where status code violation is greater than 1. So this is really only going to give you results when you have a violation of 1. You can take those results and create an alert from it, which I will show you in a little bit how to do. But I wanted to bring this up to your attention. Okay, so I've shown you some easy ways to create, I've shown you some operators. Obviously, we don't have enough time to go through all operators. I've shown you how to map or how to create charts with some of those operators. So we created a map, we created an outlier. Here we created our own query from scratch as well with our status codes. Let's do this. Let's go ahead and learn how to add this to a dashboard. So I'm going to save this first so that I don't lose it. Let's call these Apache Axis status codes, and highlight, since we're highlighting the 404s, let's call it that, highlights 404. All right, so I'm going to just save this in my personal folder. And just so that everybody's aware, where does this go? If I go back to library, I have the ability to look at my personal folder, and somewhere in there is going to be my new saved query. I also have the ability to go to the entire organization. So if anybody in my organization has shared any content, maybe they created a query that they want to share with everybody else, I can go in here, I can go to their name. Let's say I'm going to go to Corey, and I can see anything that Corey has made public and has shared with everybody. How do you share things? Well, let me show you. I'm going to go back to my personal folder. Here's that query that I just created. Notice that this icon here is grayed out. But if I click on it, it says not published. If I click on it, it gives me the ability to publish it and even give a description of what it is that I'm publishing. So now if I click on publish, that query has been published with the rest of the organization, and they can find it if they go into the org area in here. Okay, since we're in this screen, I'm going to walk you through what are my options in here. If I go to recent, I can see all the recent queries that I've run. As you notice, we've run these 3 different queries, and I can even look at they get saved. Not only the query gets saved, but the results get saved. Pin searches. Pin searches is an interesting one. I don't have any here right now, but what pin searches allow you to do is, if I'm going to run a query, and let's say that I'm going to run this query for the last 30 days, this query is probably going to take some time. So what I can do is I can pin it. See this little icon in here? It allows me to pin this search and give it any specific name that I want if I want to change the name. But once I start running it, what's going to happen is that search and the results are going to be stored in here. I can now close my browser. I can go to lunch. I can go to sleep. I don't have to be on the screen. That search is going to be running in the background. And when I come back for the next 3 days, that pin search is going to get stored along with its results in here. All right. Favorites. That's if I star something, it's going to be here. My favorites. Personal, as I mentioned before, is my personal folder, which I can create more folders in here if I wanted to by clicking this plus sign and adding folders and storing content in there. Org is the entire organization, and I can see anything that has been shared with the public. Apps, as I mentioned before, are all the different out-of-the-box content that is available that you can install. MySQL, Nginx, Palo Alto Networks, VMware. Preview are apps that we're about to launch. These are apps that are in a good state so that you can start using them, but there might still be a little bit of change between now and when they go GA. So just keep in mind that anything you use in here might have slight changes by the time they make it into the apps folder, but we want to get it out to you and start getting your feedback about some of these. So Salesforce, PagerDuty, MongoDB, Google Apps are some of the ones that are in the preview tab as well. All right, let's go back to our query. So let's learn now how to turn this chart into a dashboard panel. So before I do that, why don't I switch over here for just 1 second? Let's talk a little bit about dashboards. Dashboards are just a collection of panels. So here is a dashboard itself, but if you notice, that dashboard is made up of panels. Some of these panels are non-data, like this one in here, but most of them that you care about, at least, are going to be data panels, like this one and this ones that are highlighted in here. Each panel is built with a query behind it, and there is additional drill down. So if you click on any of these panels, you can actually go to the query that is behind that panel, or you can be linked to another dashboard depending on the configuration. Oops, sorry about that. Dashboards have a live mode. So most panels by default, most dashboards by default, you have to run. You have to say, okay, go ahead and run it, and the panel and the dashboard will be refreshed. Or you can go to a particular panel and you can change the time frame, and only that panel will be refreshed. But what if you want this dashboard to be refreshing automatically? You want it to display on your operations center, and you want that dashboard to be showing on a regular, updating on a regular basis. In that case, you would toggle it to live mode, as is shown in here. So with that in mind, when do you use a live mode versus the interactive mode? The rule of thumb is, if you are ever thinking of putting your dashboard in a large screen, whether you're sharing a screen in your operations center or for your developers, that's when you use live mode. For everything else, you're going to use the interactive mode. So exploring your data, historical reporting, any kind of investigation, you're most likely going to be using the default interactive mode. Okay. With that in mind, why don't we go into learning how to create a dashboard, and then I'll show you all the interactions that you can do with the dashboard itself. So what you do is, once you have your chart that you want to graph, or your graph that you want to put in a panel, you have this icon here at the right-hand side that says create a panel. And if you click on that, it's going to say, great, is this the same title you want to leave for your panel, or do you want to change it? And then do you want to add this to a new dashboard? Because if you do, you can just start typing a unique name in here. My dashboard, for example. Or in this case, to make it a little more interesting, do you want to add it to a dashboard that already exists? Here's the cool thing. Remember that Apache overview dashboard that came out of the box that I showed you I installed? I can add to that. So there's no reason why I cannot change those dashboards that I installed. For today, though, I'm going to install it into this Apache Access Logs, which is a dashboard that I created. And I'm just going to click on Add. And what you notice is happening is it opens a tab and is saying, okay, the new panel was successfully added. So I can now look at my dashboard. This is the dashboard that existed, and I bet you that down here at the bottom, there it is. Here is my dashboard that I just added. I'm going to just change it a little bit and maybe make it this wide so that I can see it. So you notice that in less than 2 minutes, I was able to edit my dashboard that already existed with the new panel for the dashboard that I wanted. All right, let's take a peek at what's in here. So it's in edit mode. This is a dashboard that I own. You notice in there, I'm in edit mode because I just added the panel. Let me take it out of edit mode so you can see what all you can do, how people can interact with this dashboard. So since I am no longer in edit mode, I can see the dashboard how any other user would see it, except that I have a little edit button here, which nobody else would. I can toggle into a live mode if I wanted to. In that case, that means this dashboard will be refreshed on a regular basis. I can add filters to this dashboard, or I can use, since I'm in non-edit mode, I can use any filters that have been set up for me in here. For example, I can say I only care for logs that have a user email address of Mario at sumo sumo.com, for example. And if I did that and hit enter, all the dashboards that had been specified to be affected by that filter would get refreshed. Obviously, there's nothing with that data, so this got refreshed to nothing. Let me just get rid of that to show you. Or let's say I want to use a status code of 404, you notice that what's going to happen is all the dashboards are going to get refreshed, at least the ones that were specified are getting refreshed to just show me the 404 data. Not that meaningful, but you get the point. My dashboards have been refreshed to show only those messages that have a status code of 404. Okay, how else can I interact with these dashboards? I can decide to share them. So in this case, it's already been shared. Anybody in my organization can view this dashboard. I can copy the link and share the link. I can also play with some advanced options. Normally, if someone else only has a level of data that allows them to see very limited data, a dashboard gets shared with, they would only get to see the data that they get to see. However, I can tick this box and say, when someone else views their dashboard, they can inherit my level of data access and be able to view just this dashboard with my level of data access. So that allows people to see things from your point of view, if you will. I can also refresh the dashboard, put in full screen, sign out, and all that good stuff. But let's go back to edit mode, which is what allows me to do more things to this dashboard. Now that I'm in edit mode, I can add more filters if I wanted to. I can also, let's see, I can add panels. And in this case, the panels that it's talking about is not these data panels, but it's talking about this text panel and this title panel that you see here. If you notice, I add a panel, I can add a title or a text panel, as I have done in here in this example. I can toggle themes, so I can go to a light theme, or I can go to that dark theme that most people in operation centers prefer. I can delete the dashboard, favorite it, sign out, and all that good stuff, right? When I'm in edit mode as well, I can go to each individual panel and I can tweak it. Let's go to the panel that I just put in here. You see this little cogwheel? If I click on that, I can go back and change it to a bar chart, to a pie chart, or to leave it as that column one, for example. But maybe what I want to do is I want to change the colors. I want to change the color series to be something a little more vibrant, like this one. Or I want to use color by range and specify some values and specify colors along that front as well. So this is where you can go and edit a couple of things. One of the things I wanted to point out is, by default, when you click on a dashboard, let me cancel out from this. By default, if you have a dashboard, and let me get out of done editing. If you're looking at a dashboard and you click on that dashboard, it's going to take you to the query behind it. So it's taking me back to the query. Actually, this one didn't have a default. This one was linking me to another dashboard. Okay, so let me find another one. Here we go. Okay, by default, this dashboard, if you click on it, if you click on a dashboard like this one, if you click on it, it's going to take you to the query. My mouse just froze and it's not doing anything. Sorry about that. Okay, let's do this one. It says show and search. Didn't expect this to be happening. I'm not sure why this is got stuck. Okay, let's try this. Okay, it is, what is going on? Sorry about that, guys. Of course, anytime you're doing something live, it's going to break, right? Let's try this. I'm going to take this panel, I'm going to click on that panel, and what it should do, this one is also linked to the dashboard. So I'm showing you examples of how you can edit it, and what I wanted to do was just show you the basics. All right, let's take this one. I know this one that I built for sure just has a default. So here is my dashboard, and if I click on that dashboard, it takes me back to the query behind that dashboard. So the good news for you is that you can take anyone's dashboards. You can be looking at anybody's dashboards. You can click on that dashboard and it's going to take you to the query behind it. And you can find out exactly how someone built that query. And you can tweak it. You can save it as your own query. You can tweak it and save it as your own query and maybe repurpose it for your own needs. Or if this was your dashboard, you can make your changes to the query. Let's say that we did not want to exclude these guys, for example. And then once you run it and you get your results, you can either save this into a new panel, meaning I want to create a brand new panel, or I can save those changes back to the panel so that it came from. So Sumo Logic is smart enough to understand that you just came from a panel, and I can save it back to that panel with the changes that I just made. All right, so that's the default. When you click on a panel, it takes you to the search behind it. However, you can edit that with what I showed you here. You can click on this one, and this is taking me to another dashboard and showing me data from another dashboard. How do you set that? I'm going to show you exactly how I went about setting that. I'm going to set this back into edit mode. And if you click here in the cogwheel to edit that panel, if I go into general, you will notice that this one has dashboard linking enabled, meaning when someone clicks on that panel, instead of going to the query behind it, I want it to go to some other dashboard, and that's what this is showing me, all the different dashboards that are available to me, and I can just link to this dashboard. So it could be a dashboard that's giving me more detail about what I just clicked on in there. Okay. Right, so this gives you good info about what a dashboard is all about, how to go ahead about building dashboards. It's actually pretty straightforward. Moving things around in dashboard is pretty easy. When you're edit mode, you literally just drag and drop and move things around to where you want. We're running a little bit out of time, so I do want to show you a little bit about alerts. Creating alerts themselves is pretty simple. As a matter of fact, the mechanics for creating alert are so simple that you could easily build one without really me going through it. But I'm going to walk you through a very simple example. We talked about, I think we were talking about this one, and I added this where clause saying where the status code violation is greater than 1. Because if you remember, there are some violations in here. So if I run this query now, I'm really going to only get those. Well, there are no violations now that the 60 minutes went by. Let's see. Let's do last 3 hours and see if there are any violations in here. And there are no violations. Okay, but that's okay. It's still good representation for what I want to show you. So an alert usually has a query, and at the end of that query there is a where clause, and that where clause determines whether you're going to get results for that query or not. Now, the simple way of doing it is you go to Save As, and when you are saving that search, you have the ability to schedule a search. So I could say, for example, I want to run this search on an hourly basis, and I want it to look for the last 60 minutes worth of data, and I want it to tell me, send me a notification every time the search completes, or I want to send me a notification when the number of results is, let's say, greater than 0. So that's when this where clause comes into play. If I don't have any violations, then this result will not be greater than 0, and nothing is going to get triggered. However, if I do get some results, meaning this condition applies, then here is what I want you to do. I want you to either send me an email, Mario@SumoLogic, or I want you to do one of the following ones in here. So before I go into what each one of these are, just want to show you that creating an alert is very straightforward. You specify how often you run, what time range should I run the query for, what alert condition should I look for, and then if that does happen, what should I do with that alert itself. So let's talk a little bit about the alert types. Pretty straightforward. Script action means I want you to run a custom script. You tell it, this is a script that you own, and you tell Sumo Logic where that script sits. And that way, Sumo Logic can initiate that script. We don't know what that script does. We don't know the content. We don't know anything. That script could be calling other scripts. But what we do know is where it sits so that we can trigger it. So this is used often by customers that have some systems that are behind a firewall on premise, and they want to trigger some action on those other systems. ServiceNow connection. ServiceNow is a ticketing system, and this allows them to initiate a ticket within ServiceNow. So we have a tighter integration with ServiceNow to do that. Webhook allows us to send this message to like a Slack or a HipChat or anything that has a REST API that we can connect with. And save to index allows us to save the results of this query into a small index, into a small bucket, so that you can query them at a later time. The interesting one from here for you guys is probably Webhook. So if you were to choose Webhook, you can then choose whatever connection you've created. Let's say I want to use the Slack connection. I can even customize a payload a little further if I wanted to, and then I can save it. So every time this message gets triggered, it's going to send a message to this particular Slack channel using this username, using this authentication token, and here's the text that is going to drop onto that Slack channel. How did this connection come about? Let me walk you through this. But I just wanted to show you how easy it was to create an alert. All right, to create those connections, you go under Manage, you go to Connections, and this is, by the way, an administrative function, so maybe not everybody has access to it. But this is how you go about creating a brand new connection. Click on Add. Here's all the different types of connections that you can do. Actually, in reality, you can do anything because this template allows you to put a connection to anything. However, we've already worked with Slack, Datadog, HipChat, so we get you started. We know, for example, the kind of payload or the format of the payload that Slack is looking for. So we just get you started. So the difference between Webhook and any of these, it's minimal. It's that for these ones, we recognize how to get you started, and we just give you a format to start from, so you don't have to start from scratch. Okay, and what is it that you can pass? If you go into Help Documentation, you can just go into Webhook, and you can see from here, Webhook connections, you'll see all the different variables that you can send to it. So I'm just going to scroll down here for a second. Here's all the different variables that you can pass. You can pass the name of the search, the description of the search, the query itself. Perhaps you want to send the aggregate results in JSON format, or the raw results themselves, or maybe you just need the number of results. You just need a count for that kind of stuff. So that's the kind of information that you can pass on to, say, your Slack channel or your HipChat, or even to that script action that I was talking about before as well. All right, I know I've talked quite a bit today of all the different parts of the tool. One of the things that I didn't show you was live tailing. What if you actually want to live tail to tell your information? We allow you to do that from the UI, which is pretty cool. So let me go into live tail here, and you can see that you can live tail by using any of the metadata tags. So let's say that I'm a developer and I don't even have access to production environments. However, from here, this is allowing me to live tail my Apache access files, not only in host A, so I don't have to jump to host A and host B and host C. I'm able to live tail across the different hosts that have Apache access data on it. So pretty cool, right? I can do that. I can also say, all right, just filter for the word 404. So ideally, it's giving me only those that have a 404. I can do things like I can highlight terms like 404. Perhaps I want to see those that are coming from a Mozilla browser, and maybe those that have, I don't know, the word get in it, right? So now notice how my data is scrolling and the terms are highlighting. I can pause this if I wanted to. I can scroll up and scroll down just to see some of the messages that were in there. I can jump to the bottom so it continues scrolling if I want to. So live tailing from the UI is very, very cool. If you do not want to live tail from the UI, you actually have the ability to use a CLI, a command line interface. So you can download this standalone tool. I think we have it up in GitHub. You can this walks you through installing and using it. Of course, there's going to be a little bit of a handshake, so you have to have an access key and a couple of those things once you install it. But you will be able to run commands like, for example, let's see if I have some stuff in here. Live tail equals source category equals my database, my SQL database, and the word error, for example, and so on and so forth. So the ability to live tail into environments that you might not even have access to, I think is very, very, very powerful. You can run multiple sessions as well. So I can run one in here, and I can run one for my error, for example. And I can be running some of these live tail sessions side by side. Now, live tail sessions you cannot put onto dashboards. You can imagine that would be a little weird, but there's nothing keeping you from running a live tail session here on your screen as well. Okay, there's a couple of preferences. You can change the color to green. You can change the text and the line spacing, and all that good stuff as well. All right, let me stop all the live test sessions for now. Let me stop this one as well. Good. One last thing I wanted to show you before I talk about the advanced topics of that I talked about optimization. You noticed, let me just search for, let's say, data source category equals, this will be a good example. Here's my snort data. Snort data is giving me a little bit of information about TCP, some IP addresses, and so on and so forth. You notice there's two big buttons right here in the middle that I talked nothing about. So I just did a quick search for the last 15 minutes. I get 64 pages of snort data. This could be a lot of data to sift through. If I click on log reduce, what this option is doing, what this operator is doing right now is it's categorizing all my data into signatures. What it did is it went out there and it said, hey, here is a line that looks very, very similar to a lot of other lines, a lot of other messages that you have. As a matter of fact, there's 457 messages that look like this. And it's showing me what the message looks like. Whatever has a little star are the things that are variables, the things that are different from one message to the other. But this is pretty cool because this brought down 457 pages worth of data down to just 2 pages. And I can see those events kind of categorized into these signatures, as we call them at Sumo Logic, signatures. The really cool thing is that I can look at those things that only happen once. Look at this one. Here's one that only happened one time. Here's another one. So it looks like there's some SSH stuff going on in here. And it allows you to find that needle in a haystack, even sometimes when you don't know what that needle looks like. So it's giving me information about a suspicious file name. I might not even be looking for that suspicious file name, but now all of a sudden I have this information that I can start digging in a little more. And if I wanted to look at that particular message, I can always click on that number. It takes me to the message itself. So now I can see the message itself. I can see where it's coming from. I can see the host that is coming from as well. Perhaps I want to dig in a little bit deeper because that host might be compromised. So what I can do is I can say, now for this particular host, I want to see data for 1 minute before and 1 minute after. So I'm starting to do a little bit more forensics, and it's highlighting the message itself. Notice how this little pink bar is in the middle. That's because I pulled 1 minute worth of data before and 1 minute worth of data after. I can see that that message highlighted in light blue, and I can see the messages that happen above. So I can scroll up and look at that kind of information. So what you're seeing here is the ability to zero in on a particular message or start using log reduce to compare the data that is out there. And compare or to reduce the amount of data that it's out there because you're comparing it to other messages and creating signatures out of it. Let me go back to, I want to show you what log compare does now. Log compare gives you the ability to run a log reduce, but at different time frames. The simplest scenario is I just pushed out code and I want to compare the same amount of data with 24 hours ago. Oh, I have too many tabs open. Let me close a couple of these tabs so that it's not mad with me. All right. So in this particular case, I can say, run log reduce right now and do this whole signature thing, but also do it for the same time frame. So last 15 minutes, but 24 hours ago. So notice it's now doing a log compare with a time shift of minus 24. And what it's going to do is it's going to identify the signatures then. It's going to identify the signatures now. And it's going to tell me, oh, look, this signature, which now happens 443 times, seems to be 5.5% less than it was 24 hours ago. Yet this signature is happening 13% more than it was happening a few times ago. And here's one that is happening 11% less than it did in 24 hours ago. And I wanted to show you this one here. This signature is gone altogether. So it happened 24 hours ago, but it's not happening now. So what is this used for? If you squashed your bugs because your new code got rid of that bug, you want to see this kind of stuff, right? Oh, so that bug is now gone. Or you can have messages like this one. Oh man, I introduced new bugs. In that case, this bug wasn't happening before, but it is happening now. So log compare is the ability to look at data, to run signatures on data now, on data before, and you can run it for these set periods, or you can click on custom and you can say, yeah, give me data for minus 48, for example, if you want to do it for 2 hours ago. Or last thing I'm going to show you is, what if I want to do, maybe my maybe my data looks like this: prod snort versus dev snort. So in this case, what I'm saying is, don't do any time shift. Run prod snort now and for the last 15 minutes and show me the signatures for that, and run dev snort now for the same 15 minutes and show me and compare those two and show me how my code that is in dev is going to squash the stuff that exists in prod. All right. All very, very useful information. Okay, so we've covered a lot. We're 10 minutes over the hour. Well, the last thing I want to show you, and I'm going to do this very briefly, I'm going to do this with slides, is I'm going to skip a couple of these slides, which is what I just showed you. I talked about apps already, but optimizing your search. So some of the things that you can take advantage, and I'm going to point you to this webinar when you get a chance to look at it, is you can build partitions, you can build scheduled views, and you can build field extraction rules to make your queries a lot more optimized. I already talked about field extraction rules. This is the ability to create a rule that will parse your data when the data is getting ingested. I will highly, highly, highly recommend that you start looking at field extraction rules as soon as you can, because this is going to make your queries a lot easier. It's going to make your searches a lot easier to read as well, and it's going to make your queries return a lot faster because you don't have to be parsing at query time. Scheduled views is the ability to pre-aggregate your data so that you can get faster counts and sums over long time ranges. So that way, when you create a search, your data is already aggregated. And partitions is the ability to store data in different indexes. So instead of searching one big bucket, you can specify, you can say, no, my data is definitely not in these 5 buckets. It's just in this smaller bucket. So the ability to partition your data so that you can go directly to an index where you want to search your data. All right, so with that in mind, what I'm going to do now is I noticed that a couple of questions came in. I'm going to try to go through those questions, but if you have any specific questions as well, I'd be happy to tackle those. Let me stop the recording for now.